First of all, thanks for having me here. I will start with two questions to you. So first is, who of you is familiar with the general algorithms in quantum to estimate or calculate the ground state of chemical molecules? Raise your hands. So quite a few, okay. Who of you is familiar with the different ansätze that we can use with mainly VQE calculations? That's also 15% almost. So that's what we did. So let's dive into the topic of reinforcement learning for optimizing these ansätze. We start with a little motivation. Then I present our hybrid quantum classical workflow, show then our way, what we did for optimization, and have a little conclusion with me. Just a few words about my company. We are located, our headquarters is in Franconia, near Erlangen, by Nuremberg. We have three locations, one in Bubenreuth, one in Dortmund, and one in Thessaloniki, Greece. We are 350 employees, founded 1983, and doing more or less individual customer software. We are a software distributor. So we are bringing together several technologies to have our customer projects succeed. And we are in several markets like industry, transportation, railway, public service, infrastructure, and nowadays starting to dig into quantum computing as well. So this was the advertisement. Let's dive into our problem. Our use case considers the simulation of corrosion inhibition materials to periodic boundary material aluminum that is needed in aerospace and automotive industry. The first step is we have to identify materials. There we chose two inhibitors that we want to take for our proof of concept. That is the 1,2,4-triazole and a derivative of that, the 1,2,4-triazole 3-TO. We choose them because they are relatively temperature stable, they are in the correct pH range and have a high efficiency, and are also small, so that we have a chance to get them also on hardware. Then we have to define the periodic boundary conditions. That's our aluminum substrate, and then we prepared our classical quantum workflow. That's just the picture what we have. We had at the top our inhibitor molecules, and top down the aluminum substrate. So we see we have several degrees of freedom in that, with the angle of the inhibitor to the substrate, and also the position where we have. That's a little computational workflow plan of ours. Little sketchy, just a few steps that we wanted to tackle and take. So the first one I already saw, we looked into a database for the corrosion inhibitor molecules. So we also looked into the literature to see if and find references that these inhibitors are already used in aerospace and automotive industry. Then we did some fast electronic structure calculations, like optimizing our molecule geometries and so forth. Then we put it in our density functional theory software that was CP2K. And then we identified the active space to use and prepared our ansatz and made some quantum simulations. We did some proof of concepts for running our computations on hardware as well, but not for the inhibitor molecules. So we chose to use the VQE with an ansatz of UCCSD. That's the golden standard of just calculating ground state of chemical molecules. I show you here that we had benchmarked from a small molecule like the H2 to the LIH molecule. And in between we have our inhibitor molecules. So you see we have a range of gates in our ansatz from 150 to 13,700, and depth of our ansatz from 83 on the left to 9,700. We can see also that we can use just the Qiskit ansatz construction for the UCSD or optimized ansätze, also for our molecule. We have there, for our inhibitors, reduced the active space, and for the optimized version for LIH, we just use the free-score transformer. And in 2024, we faced certain hardware constraints when we wanted to run this on maybe an IonQ device. So we had all this reduced, we had our ansatz prepared, we had our molecules optimized, and we're ready to run all this on the hardware, and they said, your circuit is too deep, so this won't work. So we had to come up to optimize this somehow. This is the combined workflow that we have. We come from the CP2K world, where we did our DFT calculations, and there's a nice socket interface to directly communicate with Qiskit. So we can then transfer, after optimization with DFT, our second quantized integrals to Qiskit, and then do there our calculations. And we can also extend this to use bracket, where we have real access to our hardware devices. So we ran for the proof of concept on the state vector simulator, and also for H2 at least, on IonQ and IQM. So some optimization techniques to reduce our ansatz depth and size. The first one is handcrafted. So we go here and construct our ansatz by hand. So we know H2 has 2 single excitations and 1 double excitation. And when we combine this with the Hartree-Fock state and use the Stroger evolution gates, we come up with this little circuit. We can further improve this then by hand to this one. So this is the reduced H2 circuit that I showed the sources before, with 17 gains in the depth of 10. We were wondering if we can do these things automatically, not only diving into the molecular structure, then building all these trotterization operations, and then further optimizing this. So we started out with a little brute force proof of concept with integration, integrating recursion. So we use a starting point, the full UCSD ansatz from Qiskit that is provided, that has 150 gates. And then we calculate the ground state and just remove randomly a gate from the ansatz. And then we calculate the ground state and see if we have deviations in the resulting ground state. If deviations are too far, then we stop. If we have our deviation being less than epsilon, then we store the solution and go one iteration step further to reduce another gate. This led us, with a simple version, not really thinking about it, to a gate minimum of 126. That was an improvement of 16%. And then we can go into, we didn't find the optimal solution that we wanted to have, but it was possible to make just a quick proof that this can be done. So we have an improvement of 36%, and lets us to 96 gates. Not optimal, but quick and dirty, and it worked. But we didn't find how this can be done in a directed way. So we came up with our reinforcement learning ansatz. So we wanted to know if our machine learning models or reinforcement learning agent can determine a policy how to optimize these circuits. So we have on the left the classes of gates for the UCSD. We have Hadamard gates, square root dagger gates, square root gates, and CNOT gates. We have as actions defined to remove a gate in our ansatz, and this a new ansatz then will be combined with the initial state. We compute with VQE the ground state, compute reward put this into a policy, and this determines our actions. At first, we came up with random actions. So we just policy chose to the gate class to remove, but the index was randomly chosen. So this we chose here the Hadamard, and we want to remove or exchange a Hadamard gate, and this one was then randomly chosen to be exchanged. We exchanged it with an identity gate because we wanted the structure or the indices to be to stay the same. This led us to somehow random behavior. So we improved our actions to not only choose the gate class by policy, but also the position in our circuit. But then, of course, our action space exploded. At least for LIH, we have now 11,500 actions that we can learn. This takes time. So let's come to our rewarding scheme. For the random version, we were just interested in how far away are we from the exact ground state. Then we turned over to a base rewarding scheme where we included the number of identity gates, or how many gates we exchanged to an identity. This led to an interesting learning behavior because in a certain point in time, our algorithm decided that exchanging another gate would lead to a less reward. So he exchanged just an already exchanged gate at a certain point in time. So we didn't come any further. So we improved this rewarding scheme a bit to also take into account the number of exchanges. So it gets a penalty when it exchanges an ID gate with an ID gate. And as policy, we use the softmax policy so that we can directly use the values as action probabilities to take. These are our results. You see at the top for H2 molecule and then for LIH. The red values show the random behavior. That's really random output. So the deviation of exact ground state calculated and the resulting ground state is quite far away. So we more explored into the improved versions. And we see for H2 we managed to have a good result. So we have a mean final reward of 1.9. So we have less deviation of the exact ground state to the resulting ground state, and we get also the reward for exchanging the gates. Unfortunately, because of the explosion of our action space for LIH, we had to stop at a certain point in time because the runtime of calculating the ground state took too long. But we are on a good way. This needs to be improved and continued, and then I'm sure we will have same reward as for H2. So these were my results. Let's come to a little conclusion. We found out that there is huge potential for improving the general UCSD ansatz and adapt it to the molecule that you have. We can simply do this by brute force or by the simple reinforcement learning algorithm. But we have also to understand now the results, just to dive deeper into what the policy looks like, what real outcome do we have, how this behaves if we extend and want really to come to the optimal solutions, what is the directed way that our algorithm chooses, and bring this together also with theory. For future improvements, we aim to improve the runtime of our algorithm and also the description and the action space. Maybe there we find something better that not our action space excludes with the number of gates, because LIH is not really interesting. What we wanted to tackle is our inhibitor molecules with maybe not that less active space, but maybe increased active space to be run on also hardware to get our results. And we want to exchange the algorithm. Just for now, we used plain VQE. We know at the depth VQE we can get several savings in runtime. So maybe faster results for our policies. And yeah, later on we want also to run real tests. We have our workflow ready for the inhibitor molecules. We have compared them for simulating devices, but not on real hardware right now. So we want to bring this really to the QPUs and also use mitigation techniques. And that's it from my side. Thanks.
Thank you, Marc. Is there any question? 2 questions.
I'm a little more familiar with the reinforcement learning side of things, so this question might not make any sense at all. But if I understood you correctly, you started with one specific ansatz, and then iteratively simplified with some reinforcement learning policy that you ended up with. That's some parameterized function. Have you tried what happens if you apply this parameterized function to different initial circuits?
Not right now with our results. We were quite happy to have these results made up. We want to improve at first on a real workflow so that learning doesn't take that much time. And then we can shift and can see what really, maybe some gadgets that we can identify, like patterns in the circuit that we have to reduce.
The reason I asked is you already said that it's very expensive to optimize this because of the evaluation step. So maybe it would make sense to produce a good policy on a smaller circuit and then see what happens if you apply the same policy to a bigger circuit.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
that's a great idea. We can try this with the learned one from H2 and adapt it and use it for LH as well.
Thanks a lot. So in your function that you use there to calculate the, sort of the penalty, or basically you also have the exact energy. But of course, eventually there will be no exact energy. So what could then be a proxy to that, essentially? So you showed you have the energy minus the one that is calculated with the given circuit. But of course, eventually, here. So eventually there will be no exact ground state energy. So what do you imagine to do in those cases then?
But do you mean there's no exact energy? I know that I have the full UCCSD ansatz with my molecule, so I can compute my ground state for the simulation right now.
But eventually you will not be able to compute the exact ground state, even with the UCCSD ansatz. I mean, if you think large, I mean big.
Yeah, okay.
That's what I mean.
Yeah, I will stop training my policy with that and try to adapt to a little ones that I learned. So I want to identify gadgets, patterns in the ansatz that we are not really familiar right now in theory, so that I can implement this also for the bigger ansatzes. Then I don't need to train anything.
Okay, thanks.
Mm.